72-year-old Robert Mitchell hadn't spoken to his daughter-in-law in 3 years. He blamed her for his son's death, and nothing could change his mind. But when an unexpected visitor appeared at his door on a rainy Tuesday evening, the old man discovered that some grudges are too heavy for the human heart to carry alone. What happened in the next 2 hours would challenge everything Robert believed about forgiveness, family, and the power of letting go. The rain hammered against the windows of the small ranch house in suburban Cleveland, with the kind of persistence that matched the old man's stubbornness. Robert Mitchell sat in his worn leather recliner, the same one he'd occupied every evening for the past 43 years, staring at the empty chair across from him. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, and the house felt as cold and unwelcoming as the man who lived in it. At 72, Robert was still a formidable presence. His shoulders, though slightly stooped from decades of construction work, retained their breadth. His hands, weathered and scarred from years of handling concrete and steel, rested on the armrests of his chair like gnarled tree roots. His gray hair was always perfectly combed, his face always clean-shaven, because routine was one of the few things that still made sense in his world. The empty chair had once belonged to his son David. For 28 years David had sat in that chair during family dinners, holiday gatherings, and quiet Sunday afternoons watching football. The chair had witnessed David's transformation from a gangly teenager to a successful insurance agent, from a nervous young man bringing home his first girlfriend to a proud father showing pictures of his baby daughter. Now the chair just sat there, a monument to everything Robert had lost and everything he refused to forgive. The house around him told the story of a man stuck in time. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece, but they all stopped at the same date 3 years ago. There were pictures of David as a baby, David's high school graduation, David's wedding day, and David holding his newborn daughter Emma. But there were no pictures of Emma beyond her 5th birthday, no recent family gatherings, no evidence that life had continued beyond that terrible day in March when everything changed. Robert picked up the remote control and mindlessly flipped through television channels, seeing nothing, hearing nothing. The evening news droned on about politics and crime and weather forecasts that didn't matter to a man who had no plans beyond sitting in his chair and nursing his anger. He had perfected the art of rage over the past 3 years, polishing it like a craftsman perfecting his trade. The telephone rang, jarring him from his bitter reverie. He glanced at the caller ID and felt his jaw clench. Sarah Mitchell, his daughter-in-law, the woman he held responsible for destroying his family. He let it ring, and ring, and ring. On the 10th ring, his answering machine picked up. Her voice filled the room, soft and pleading as always. "Dad, it's Sarah, I know you're there. I know you don't want to talk to me, but Emma starts 3rd grade next week, and she's been asking about you. She wants to show you her new backpack. She remembers how you used to take her school shopping every year before David died." Robert's grip tightened on the remote control until his knuckles turned white. "I understand that you're angry with me," Sarah continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I understand that you blame me for the accident. Maybe you're right, maybe I am responsible. But Emma isn't responsible, Dad. She's just a little girl who misses her grandfather. She doesn't understand why you stopped loving her." The line went quiet for a moment, and Robert could hear Sarah crying softly. "David wouldn't want this," she whispered. "You know he wouldn't want his daughter to grow up thinking her grandfather doesn't care about her. Please, Dad, just call me back, or come see her. She's performing in the school play next month. She's playing a princess, and she's so excited. She said she wants her grandpa Robert to see her crown." The answering machine beeped, and silence returned to the house. Robert stared at the empty chair and felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Sarah was wrong about one thing. He hadn't stopped loving Emma. That was the problem. He loved his granddaughter so much that seeing her meant confronting the truth about David's death, and that was a truth he wasn't ready to face. The accident had happened on March 15, 3 years ago. David had been driving home from work during an unexpected spring snowstorm when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into the driver's side of his car. David died instantly, they said. He didn't suffer, they said. But Robert knew that wasn't true. David had suffered every day of his marriage to Sarah because she had never appreciated what she had. At least, that's what Robert told himself. The truth was more complicated, but Robert had spent 3 years constructing a version of events that allowed him to channel his grief into anger, his loss into blame. It was easier to hate Sarah than to accept that sometimes terrible things happen to good people for no reason at all. Sarah had been working late that night again. She was always working late, always putting her career as a marketing executive before her family. If she had been home, David wouldn't have had to pick up Emma from soccer practice. If she had been home, David would still be alive. It was a simple equation in Robert's mind. Sarah's ambition equals David's death. He had said as much at the funeral, in front of everyone. He had stood at the graveside, watching them lower his only child into the ground, and he had looked Sarah in the eye and said, "This is your fault. You killed my son." The memory still burned in his chest like acid. He stood up abruptly, his joints protesting after hours in the chair, and walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator was nearly empty, just some leftover pizza, a half-gallon of milk that was probably sour, and a six-pack of beer. He grabbed a beer and opened it, taking a long pull while staring out the kitchen window at the house next door. The Johnsons lived next door, a young couple with twin boys who reminded Robert painfully of David at that age. Mrs. Johnson had tried to be neighborly after David's death, bringing casseroles and offering to help with yard work. But Robert had made it clear he wanted to be left alone. Eventually the casseroles stopped coming, and the Johnsons learned to avoid eye contact when they saw him in the driveway. Robert preferred it that way. Isolation was safer than connection. Anger was more reliable than hope. He was halfway through his beer when the doorbell rang. Robert froze. Nobody came to see him anymore. His few remaining friends had given up trying to draw him out of his shell, and Sarah had stopped trying to visit after he had slammed the door in her face last Christmas. He glanced at the clock on the microwave, 7:23 p.m. Too late for solicitors, too early for emergencies. The doorbell rang again, followed by a gentle knock. Robert set down his beer, and walked slowly to the front door, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. He peered through the peephole and saw a man standing on his porch. The man appeared to be in his 30s, with shoulder-length dark hair, and a neatly trimmed beard. He was wearing simple clothes, jeans and a white button-down shirt, and he was getting soaked by the rain. Robert didn't recognize him. There was no car in the driveway, no indication of how this stranger had arrived at his door on a miserable Tuesday evening. For a moment, Robert considered simply ignoring the visitor, until he went away. But something about the man's presence was different. He wasn't shifting impatiently from foot to foot like a salesman or delivery person. He was simply standing there, completely still, as if he had all the time in the world. Robert unlocked the door, and opened it just enough to peer out. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff with disuse. The man smiled, and it was the kind of smile that reached his eyes and somehow made the gloomy evening seem a little brighter. "Hello, Robert," the man said. "My name is Jesus. I was wondering if we could talk." Robert blinked. "Jesus, that's your name?" "Yes, like Jesus Christ. Exactly like that." Robert studied the stranger's face. There was something unsettling about his calm demeanor, something that made Robert feel exposed and uncomfortable. "Look, mister, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." "I'm not selling anything," Jesus said gently. "I'm here because someone who loves you very much has been praying for you every night for 3 years." A chill ran down Robert's spine, that had nothing to do with the rain-soaked air. "Who? Your son David." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He gripped the doorframe to steady himself, his face draining of color. "That's not funny." "I'm not trying to be funny, Robert. I'm trying to help you understand that the prison you've built around your heart is destroying more than just your own life." Robert's hand trembled on the doorknob. Something about this stranger's voice, about the way he spoke with such certainty about things he couldn't possibly know, made Robert's carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "Who are you really?" Robert whispered. "I'm someone who understands loss," Jesus replied. "I'm someone who knows what it's like to watch the people you love suffer, and I'm someone who's here to tell you that your son is not at peace." "David is dead," Robert said flatly. "David's body is dead," Jesus corrected. "But David's soul is very much alive, and it's tormented by what his death has done to his family. He watches his daughter grow up wondering why her grandfather abandoned her. He watches his wife cry herself to sleep every night, carrying guilt that isn't hers to bear. He watches his father slowly dying from the inside out, poisoned by anger and blame." Robert felt tears sting his eyes for the first time in 3 years. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Jesus stepped closer, seemingly unbothered by the rain that continued to pour down around him. "Tell me, Robert, what did David love most in this world?" The answer came automatically, painfully: his family. "And what is his family doing now?" Robert's voice broke, falling apart. "Because of choices you've made. Because you decided that holding on to your anger was more important than honoring your son's memory by loving the people he loved." The truth in those words was like a knife twisting in Robert's chest. He had spent 3 years convincing himself that his rage was justified, that Sarah deserved his hatred, that shutting out Emma was somehow protecting himself from further pain. But standing face to face with this strange man who spoke with such devastating accuracy about his life, Robert began to see his actions through different eyes. Sarah killed him, Robert said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Did she? Jesus asked quietly. Or did a drunk driver kill him? If she had been home, maybe David would still be alive. Or maybe they both would have died in a different accident on a different day. Or maybe Emma would have been in the car too. You can play the what-if game forever, Robert, but it will never bring David back. All it does is steal the life you still have left to live. Robert stood there in his doorway, rain beginning to blow onto his face, staring at this man who seemed to see straight through to his soul. Part of him wanted to slam the door, to retreat back to his chair and his anger and his comfortable misery. But another part of him, a part that had been buried under 3 years of grief and rage, was desperate for relief from the weight he'd been carrying. I don't know how to forgive her, he admitted. I know, Jesus said with infinite compassion, that's why I'm here. Robert looked into the stranger's eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in 3 years, hope. It terrified him, and comforted him at the same time. Can I come in? Jesus asked. I think it's time we talked about what David really wants for his family. Robert hesitated for a long moment, his hand still gripping the door. Then, almost against his own will, he stepped aside and opened the door wider. Okay, he said quietly, but I don't have anything to offer you. I don't cook anymore. I barely eat anymore. Jesus smiled as he stepped into the warmth of the house. I'm not here for food, Robert. I'm here for you. As Jesus entered the living room, his eyes immediately went to the empty chair across from Robert's recliner. He stood there for a moment, his expression filled with infinite sadness. He used to love sitting there, Jesus said softly, especially on Sunday afternoons watching football with you. He said those were some of his happiest moments, just sitting with his dad, not needing to talk, just being together. Robert felt his knees buckle slightly. How could you possibly know that? Jesus turned to face him, and in his eyes Robert saw something that made his breath catch. It was love. Pure, unconditional, unwavering love, but it was also something else. It was recognition, as if this man had been watching Robert's life unfold from the very beginning. I know because I've been with you through all of this, Robert. I was there the day David was born, when you held him for the first time and promised you'd always protect him. I was there when you taught him to ride a bike, when you helped him with his homework, when you walked him down the aisle at his wedding. I was there the night he died, when you got the phone call that shattered your world. Tears were streaming down Robert's face now, 3 years' worth of suppressed emotion finally breaking through the dam he'd built around his heart. And I was there every night since then, watching you tear yourself apart with grief and guilt and anger. Watching you push away everyone who tried to help you, watching you break Emma's heart over and over again, because you were too afraid to face your own pain. I couldn't, Robert sobbed. I couldn't look at her without seeing him, without remembering what we lost. Jesus moved closer and gently placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. The touch was warm and comforting, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I understand, Jesus said. Grief makes us do things that go against our nature. It makes us hurt the people we love most because we're so afraid of being hurt again. But David doesn't want you to hide from his daughter, Robert. He wants you to love her twice as much, once for you, and once for him. Robert looked up at this man who claimed to be Jesus, and for the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to really think about Emma. Not the painful reminder of what he'd lost, but the beautiful little girl who had inherited her father's laugh and her grandfather's stubborn streak. The little girl who had been sending him birthday cards that he threw away without reading. The little girl who was going to play a princess in a school play and wanted her grandpa Robert to see her crown. She must hate me, Robert whispered. Children don't hate like adults do, Jesus replied. Emma is confused and hurt, but she still loves you. She still hopes that someday you'll come back to her. She still believes that the grandfather who used to read her bedtime stories and take her fishing is still in there somewhere. The image of Emma, 8 years old now, missing her front teeth when she smiled, probably taller than Robert remembered, pierced through his carefully maintained numbness like an arrow. Sarah says she's in a school play, Robert said hesitantly. She is. She's playing Princess Aurora in Sleeping Beauty. She's been practicing her lines for weeks, and she told her mother that she's going to look for you in the audience, just in case you decide to come. Robert felt his heart breaking all over again, but this time it was breaking open rather than breaking apart. I've been such a fool. You've been a man in pain, Jesus corrected gently. There's a difference. Pain makes us do things we never thought we'd do, but pain also creates the opportunity for healing, if we're brave enough to let it. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and looked around his living room, as if seeing it for the first time. The house that had once been filled with laughter and family gatherings now felt like a mausoleum. The photographs on the mantel were covered with dust. The empty chair across from him seemed to mock everything he'd lost rather than honor everything he'd had. I don't know where to start, he said. You start by picking up the phone, Jesus said simply. You call Sarah and you tell her you want to see Emma. You tell her you're sorry for the pain you've caused. You tell her that you want to try to rebuild what you've broken. What if she won't forgive me? What if Emma doesn't want to see me? Jesus smiled. Robert, that little girl has been waiting for you to come back to her for 3 years, and Sarah has been carrying so much guilt about David's death that she'll be grateful beyond words to know that you don't blame her anymore. But I do blame her, Robert said automatically, then stopped. Did he? After 3 years of nurturing his anger, did he still really believe that Sarah was responsible for David's death, or had his blame become a habit, a way to avoid facing the randomness and unfairness of loss? Do you? Jesus asked, reading his thoughts. Or do you blame the universe for taking your son too soon? Do you blame yourself for not being able to protect him? Do you blame God for allowing tragedy to strike your family? Robert was quiet for a long moment, really examining his feelings for the first time in years. I blamed her because it was easier than admitting that sometimes terrible things just happen, that sometimes there's no one to blame, no way to make sense of it, no way to control it. And now? Now I think I've wasted 3 years hating someone who's been suffering just as much as I have. Jesus nodded approvingly. That's the beginning of wisdom, Robert. And it's also the beginning of healing. Robert looked at the empty chair again, but this time instead of seeing absence, he saw possibility. Instead of seeing what was lost, he saw what could still be saved. Will you help me? He asked. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to stop being angry. I don't know how to be a grandfather again. I'll help you, Jesus promised. But first you need to understand something important about your son's death. Robert tensed, afraid of what he might hear. David didn't die because God was punishing you or your family. He didn't die because Sarah worked too much, or because you weren't a good enough father, or because life is meaningless and cruel. David died because he lived in a world where drunk drivers exist, where accidents happen, where bodies are fragile, and life is precious precisely because it's temporary. Then why did it have to be him? Robert asked, the question that had tortured him for 3 years finally escaping his lips. I don't know, Jesus said honestly. But I know that his death doesn't have to be meaningless if you use it to love more deeply, forgive more freely, and live more fully. I know that David's greatest wish is for his death to bring his family closer together, not tear them apart. Robert felt something shifting inside his chest, like ice beginning to thaw after a long winter. The anger that had sustained him for 3 years was melting away, and underneath it was a grief so raw and overwhelming that it threatened to drown him. I miss him so much, he whispered. I know you do, and you always will, but missing him doesn't mean you have to stop living. Robert nodded, tears flowing freely now. For the first time since David's funeral, he was crying not from anger but from love. Love for his son, love for his granddaughter, even love for the daughter-in-law he had spent so long hating. What do I say to Emma? He asked. How do I explain why I've been gone? You tell her the truth, Jesus said. You tell her that Grandpa was very sad when Daddy died, and sometimes when grown-ups are very sad, they make mistakes. You tell her that you're sorry, and that you love her, and that you want to be her grandfather again. And Sarah, you tell her that you were wrong to blame her. You tell her that you know she loved David as much as you did. You tell her that you want to honor his memory by being the family he always wanted you to be. Robert walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photograph of Emma on her 5th birthday, the last birthday he had celebrated with her. She was wearing a pink princess dress and a plastic tiara, grinning at the camera with chocolate cake smeared on her cheek. Behind her, David was laughing, his hands on his daughter's shoulders, his face radiant with pride and joy. She looks like him, Robert said softly. She has his heart too, Jesus replied. Kind, forgiving, full of love, just like her grandfather, when he allows himself to remember who he really is. Robert looked at Jesus, this mysterious man who had appeared on his doorstep with words of truth and grace, and felt a presence he hadn't experienced in years. It was peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of something greater than pain. Are you really? He began, but Jesus shook his head gently. Does it matter who I am? What matters is the choice you make right now. Do you choose love or anger? Do you choose love or anger? Do you choose healing or bitterness? Do you choose to honor your son's memory by loving his family, or do you choose to dishonor it by staying trapped in your grief? Robert looked at the photograph in his hands, then at the empty chair, then at the telephone sitting silent on the kitchen counter. I choose love, he said firmly. I choose my granddaughter. Jesus smiled, and the smile was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, warming the cold house with its radiance. Then make the call, Robert. Your family is waiting for you to come home. But when Robert finally made that phone call, the conversation that followed would reveal a secret that Sarah had been hiding for 3 years, a secret that would change everything Robert thought he knew about the night David died. Robert stood in his kitchen, staring at the phone as if it were a loaded weapon. His hands trembled as he reached for the receiver, then pulled back, then reached again. Jesus stood nearby, not pushing, not rushing, simply present with a patience that seemed infinite. What if she hangs up on me? Robert asked for the third time. She won't, Jesus said with quiet certainty. Sarah has been hoping for this call every day for 3 years. Robert finally picked up the phone and dialed the number he knew by heart but hadn't called since that terrible Christmas day when he'd slammed the door in Sarah's face. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Robert almost hung up, but then he heard Sarah's voice. Hello? Sarah, it's Robert. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Robert could hear her breathing, could almost feel her shock through the phone. Dad? She whispered finally. Is that really you? The word Dad hit him like a punch to the chest. She was still calling him Dad, even after everything he'd put her through, even after 3 years of rejection and blame and cruelty. Yes, it's me, he said, his voice breaking. Sarah, I need to tell you something. What is it? Are you okay? Are you hurt? Even now, her first concern was for his well-being. The realization made Robert's shame burn even hotter. I'm not hurt, he said, but I need to tell you that I've been wrong. About everything. About you. About the accident. About David's death. I've been so wrong, and I'm so sorry. He heard Sarah start to cry softly. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Robert interrupted. I blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. I punished you for a tragedy that none of us could have prevented. I turned my back on you and Emma, when you needed me most, and I can never forgive myself for that. Dad, please, Sarah sobbed. You were grieving. We all were. I understood. No, you didn't understand because I never let you. I never let you explain. I never let you grieve with me. I was so angry, so hurt, that I convinced myself you were the enemy when you were just another victim of the same terrible loss. Robert looked at Jesus, who nodded encouragingly. Sarah, I want to see Emma. I want to be her grandfather again, if she'll have me. I know I have no right to ask, but oh God. Yes, Sarah cried. Yes, of course. She misses you so much, Dad. She talks about you all the time. She still sets a place for you at dinner sometimes, just in case you come over. Robert felt his heart breaking and healing at the same time. I've missed 3 years of her life, but you don't have to miss any more, Sarah said through her tears. She has a school play next Thursday night. She's playing Princess Aurora. She's been practicing her lines for weeks, and she told me just yesterday that she was going to scan the audience for you, just in case you decided to come. I'll be there, Robert said without hesitation. Front row. Really? Really? And Sarah, there's something else I need to say. I need to tell you that I'm sorry for what I said at the funeral. I was out of my mind with grief, but that's no excuse for the things I said to you. You didn't kill David. You loved him as much as I did. There was another long silence, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Dad, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you 3 years ago, but I couldn't. I was too ashamed, too guilty. Robert felt his stomach drop. What is it? The night David died, he wasn't supposed to pick up Emma from soccer practice. I was supposed to do it. But I got a call from a client about a project that was falling apart, and I asked David to get her instead. He said he was tired, that he'd had a long day at work, but I insisted. I told him it was important for my career. Robert gripped the phone tighter. Sarah, let me finish, she said urgently. If I had just done what I was supposed to do, if I had just picked up my own daughter from practice, like a good mother should, David would still be alive. He died because I chose my job over my family. He died because I was selfish and ambitious and stupid. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Robert could hear Sarah crying harder now. 3 years of suppressed guilt and self-blame pouring out in a torrent of pain. For 3 years, I've lived with the knowledge that David died because of a choice I made, she continued. Every night I relive that phone call. Every morning I wake up knowing that my husband is dead, because I asked him to do something I should have done myself. You blamed me for his death, and you were right to blame me, because it was my fault." Robert closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Sarah's words. This was what she had been carrying all this time. This was the guilt that had been eating her alive while he had been consumed with his own anger and blame. He looked at Jesus, who was watching him with eyes full of compassion and understanding. "Sarah," Robert said slowly, "do you remember what you just told me about my grief, about how I was hurting, and not thinking clearly?" "That's different," Sarah said. It's not different," Robert said firmly. "You made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time. You asked your husband to help you with something, the way married couples do every day. You had no way of knowing what would happen. You're not responsible for a drunk driver running a red light. But if you hadn't asked him, he might have died in a different accident on a different day, or he might have lived to be 90. We can't know, Sarah. All we can know is that what happened was a tragedy, not a punishment." Robert found himself speaking words that Jesus had spoken to him just minutes earlier, and as he spoke them he felt their truth settling into his bones. "You're not responsible for David's death, any more than I am," he continued. "The only person responsible is the drunk driver who made the choice to get behind the wheel. We can't keep torturing ourselves with what ifs and if only. David wouldn't want that for either of us." Sarah was crying so hard now that she could barely speak. "I've been so scared to tell you. I thought if you knew the truth, you'd hate me even more." "I could never hate you more than I hated myself," Robert said quietly. "I spent 3 years blaming you because it was easier than admitting that sometimes terrible things just happen. That sometimes good people die, for no reason at all. That sometimes we can't protect the people we love, no matter how much we want to." "I miss him so much," Sarah whispered. "So do I, but he wouldn't want us to destroy ourselves with guilt. He'd want us to take care of each other. He'd want us to take care of Emma. She starts 3rd grade next week. She's so excited about her new teacher, but she's also nervous. She asked me yesterday if Grandpa Robert was still mad at her." Robert felt like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you were very sad about Daddy dying, and that sometimes when grown-ups are very sad, they need time alone to feel better. I told her that you still loved her very much." "Did she believe you?" "I think she wanted to. But she's 8 years old, Dad. She doesn't understand why loving someone means staying away from them." Robert looked at Jesus again, and in his eyes he saw a reflection of every mistake he'd made, every day he'd wasted, every moment of love he'd thrown away in service of his anger and pride. "Can I see her before the play?" Robert asked. "Can I take her school shopping like we used to do? I know it's probably too late for this year, but maybe we could get her something special for the new school year. She would love that," Sarah said, her voice brightening for the first time in the conversation. "She still has the backpack you bought her 3 years ago. It's too small now, and the zipper is broken, but she refuses to throw it away because you picked it out for her." Robert felt tears sting his eyes again. "I'll buy her 10 new backpacks. Just buy her one." Sarah laughed through her tears. "But make sure you're the one who picks it out. That's what she cares about." They talked for another 20 minutes, making plans for Robert to come over the next day to see Emma. Sarah would prepare her, would explain that Grandpa Robert was feeling better and ready to be part of their family again. They would take it slow, let Emma set the pace, let her decide how much contact she was comfortable with. When Robert finally hung up the phone, he felt as if he had just emerged from a 3-year coma. The world looked different, felt different. The house that had been a prison for so long suddenly felt like a home again. "That was harder than I expected," he told Jesus. "The most important conversations usually are," Jesus replied. "But you did well. You listened with your heart instead of your anger. She's been blaming herself all this time, 3 years of guilt and self-hatred, and I was too busy with my own pain to see hers." "Pain makes us selfish," Jesus said gently. "It makes us believe that we're the only ones suffering, that our grief is somehow more important or more valid than anyone else's. But shared pain can become shared healing, if we let it." Robert walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up another photograph, this one of David and Sarah on their wedding day. They looked so young, so happy, so unaware of the tragedy that would befall them 8 years later. David's arm was around Sarah's waist, and she was looking up at him with such love and adoration that it took Robert's breath away. "I forgot how much she loved him," Robert said softly. "She still loves him, just like you do. Just like Emma does. Love doesn't die when people die, Robert. It just changes form." What do you mean? Jesus joined him at the mantelpiece, studying the wedding photograph, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. David's love for his family didn't disappear when he died. It's still here, still real, still active in the world. Every time Sarah makes a decision based on what David would have wanted, his love is present. Every time Emma shows kindness to someone because her father taught her to be kind, his love is present. Every time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, his love is present. Robert felt a warmth spreading through his chest that he hadn't experienced in 3 years. It was peace, but it was also something more. It was connection, to David, to Sarah, to Emma, to the possibility of joy again. I want to do something for them, Robert said suddenly. Something to make up for the time I've lost, the pain I've caused. What did you have in mind? Robert thought for a moment, remembering conversations he'd had with David about his dreams and plans for the future. David always wanted to take Emma to Disney World, Robert said. He talked about it all the time, how he was going to save up money, how he was going to plan the perfect trip, how he was going to watch her face when she met all the Disney princesses. He never got the chance, and you think you could take her? I could take both of them. Sarah and Emma. We could go together, as a family. We could do all the things David wanted to do with them. Jesus smiled. That sounds like a beautiful way to honor his memory. But is it enough? Can I really make up for 3 years of abandonment with one trip? You can't make up for lost time, Robert, but you can make the most of the time you have left. You can't undo the pain you've caused, but you can choose not to cause any more pain. You can't bring David back, but you can live in a way that honors his life and his love. Robert nodded, understanding flooding through him like sunlight through stained glass windows. He couldn't change the past, but he could influence the future. He couldn't save David, but he could save his relationship with David's family. There's something else, Robert said hesitantly. Something I need to tell you. What is it? The night David died, after I got the phone call from the hospital, I prayed. For the first time in years I got down on my knees and I prayed. I begged God to bring him back, to give me another chance, to let me trade places with him. And when that didn't happen, I got angry at God. I decided that if God wouldn't answer my prayers, then God didn't exist. I stopped believing in anything except my own pain. Jesus listened without judgment, his presence radiating the same infinite patience he had shown all evening. But tonight, Robert continued, talking to you, feeling this change in my heart. I can't explain it rationally, but I feel like God is real again. Like there's something bigger than my grief, something more powerful than my anger. Faith isn't something you have to explain rationally, Jesus said. It's something you experience. It's something you live. Are you really him? Robert asked directly. Are you really Jesus Christ? Jesus looked at him for a long moment, and in his eyes, Robert saw infinite depth, infinite wisdom, infinite love. I am someone who loves you unconditionally, Jesus said. I am someone who has been with you through every moment of your pain. I am someone who sees not just who you've been, but who you can become. I am someone who believes in redemption, in forgiveness, in the possibility of new life even after great loss. But are you? Does it matter what name you give me? Jesus asked gently. What matters is that you've found your way back to love. What matters is that you've chosen healing over hatred. What matters is that tomorrow, a little girl is going to get her grandfather back. Robert felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him, as if puzzle pieces that had been scattered for 3 years were finally clicking into place. Whether this man was truly Jesus Christ, or simply an instrument of divine grace, the result was the same: transformation, healing, hope. What happens now? Robert asked. Now you live, Jesus said simply. You wake up tomorrow morning, and you choose love over anger. You go see your granddaughter and you let her know that she's precious to you. You support Sarah in her grief instead of adding to it. You honor David's memory by being the man he always believed you could be. And you, will I see you again? Jesus smiled. You'll see me every time you choose forgiveness over resentment. You'll see me every time you offer comfort instead of judgment. You'll see me every time you love someone the way you want to be loved. As Jesus spoke, Robert became aware that the rain outside had stopped. Through the living room windows, he could see stars beginning to appear between the breaking clouds. The storm was passing, leaving the air clean and fresh and full of possibility. I should let you get some rest, Jesus said. Tomorrow is going to be a big day. Will Emma like me? Robert asked, suddenly feeling nervous about seeing his granddaughter after 3 years of absence. Will she remember me? Will she forgive me? Children have an amazing capacity for forgiveness, Jesus assured him, especially when they see that someone is genuinely sorry and wants to do better. Emma has been waiting for you to come back to her. She's going to be overjoyed. Robert walked Jesus to the front door, reluctant to let this extraordinary evening end. Outside, the air smelled like rain and new beginnings. "Thank you," Robert said, "for everything, for helping me see clearly again, for helping me find my way back to my family." "Thank you for opening your door," Jesus replied, "and for opening your heart." As Jesus stepped out onto the porch, Robert noticed something strange. Despite having stood in the rain for several minutes earlier, Jesus' clothes were completely dry. His hair showed no sign of dampness, his skin no evidence of having been soaked by the storm. "How is that possible?" Robert asked, pointing to Jesus' dry clothing. Jesus just smiled. "Some things don't need explanations, Robert. They just need to be experienced." Robert watched as Jesus walked down his driveway and turned onto the sidewalk. But instead of continuing down the street, Jesus seemed to simply fade into the darkness, becoming one with the shadows and the starlight. Robert stood on his porch for a long time, breathing the clean night air and marveling at the transformation that had taken place in his heart. 3 hours ago, he had been a bitter, angry old man, isolated and consumed by grief. Now he felt alive again, connected again, hopeful again. He went back inside and looked around his living room with new eyes. Tomorrow he would clean this house from top to bottom. He would dust the photographs and arrange them properly. He would buy groceries and cook real meals. He would prepare for Emma's visit by making this place feel like a home again, instead of a monument to loss. But first he had one more phone call to make. He picked up the phone and dialed information, asking for the number of the largest toy store in the area. When the operator connected him, he was surprised to find that they were still open. "I need to buy a gift for my granddaughter," he told the sales clerk. "She's 8 years old, and she's playing a princess in a school play. I need something special, something that will let her know how proud I am of her." "We have a beautiful collection of princess dresses and accessories," the clerk said. "Tiaras, wands, jewelry. I'll take all of it," Robert said without hesitation. "Everything you have that would make a little girl feel like a real princess." After he hung up, Robert sat back in his recliner and looked at the empty chair across from him. But for the first time in 3 years, he didn't see emptiness. He saw the memory of David, not as a source of pain, but as a source of love. He saw the possibility of Emma sitting in that chair someday, telling him about school and friends and dreams. He picked up the wedding photograph from the mantelpiece one more time, studying Sarah and David's happy faces. "I'm going to take care of them," he said aloud, speaking to his son's image. "I'm going to love them the way you would have loved them. I'm going to make sure Emma grows up knowing how much her father loved her, and how much her grandfather loves her too." The photograph seemed to shimmer in the lamplight, and for just a moment, Robert could have sworn he saw David smile. Outside, the stars shone brighter than they had in years, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled midnight. It was a new day, and Robert Mitchell was finally ready to live it. But when Robert showed up at Sarah's house the next morning with arms full of princess gifts, the reunion with Emma would test everything he thought he knew about forgiveness, love, and the innocence of a child's heart. Robert stood on the front porch of the modest 2-story house where Sarah and Emma lived, his arms laden with shopping bags from the toy store. He had barely slept, spending most of the night cleaning his house and rehearsing what he would say to his granddaughter. Now in the bright morning sunlight his nervousness was almost overwhelming. The house looked different than he remembered from 3 years ago. The garden that Sarah had always been so proud of was overgrown and neglected. The white picket fence needed painting, and several of the fence posts were loose. It was clear that Sarah had been struggling, not just emotionally but financially and practically as well. Robert felt another wave of shame wash over him. While he had been wallowing in his anger and self-pity, Sarah had been trying to raise Emma alone, maintain a house, work full-time, and deal with her own grief. She had needed help, and he had turned his back on her. Before he could ring the doorbell, the front door burst open and Sarah appeared. She looked older than her 35 years, with worry lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her brown hair that hadn't been there 3 years ago. But her smile was genuine and full of hope. "Dad," she said, stepping forward to embrace him awkwardly around the shopping bags. "I can't believe you're really here. I can't believe it took me 3 years to come," Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah stepped back and looked at the bags he was carrying. "What's all this, princess supplies?" Robert said with the first genuine smile he'd felt in years. "For Emma's play, and just because. I may have gone a little overboard." Sarah laughed and the sound was like music to Robert's ears. "A little overboard? It looks like you bought out the entire toy store." "Where is she?" Robert asked, suddenly anxious to see his granddaughter. "She's in the backyard, practicing her lines on the swing set." She's been rehearsing all morning. Sarah's expression grew more serious. Dad, I need to prepare you. She's different than you remember. She's older, obviously, but she's also more guarded. The last 3 years have been hard on her. Robert nodded, understanding. I know, and I know it's my fault. It's not about fault anymore, Sarah said gently. It's about moving forward. Just be patient with her. Let her come to you. Sarah led him through the house, and Robert noticed that it was clean but sparse. Many of the decorations and furniture pieces he remembered were gone, probably sold to make ends meet. The refrigerator was covered with Emma's artwork and school papers, evidence of a little girl growing up, going to school, living her life while her grandfather nursed his bitterness. They stepped out onto the back deck, and Robert saw her. Emma was on the old wooden swing set that David had built when she was 4 years old. She was bigger now, of course. Her legs had grown long and skinny, and her dark hair was longer, pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing a pink t-shirt and jean shorts, and she was talking to herself in an animated voice, clearly practicing her lines for the play. And then Prince Philip will wake me up with true love's kiss, she was saying to an imaginary audience, and we'll live happily ever after. Robert's heart swelled with love and regret. This beautiful, spirited little girl was his granddaughter, and he had missed 3 precious years of her life. He had missed watching her learn to read, missed her losing her first tooth, missed countless bedtime stories and birthday parties, and everyday moments that could never be recovered. Emma, Sarah called gently. Someone's here to see you. Emma looked up, and when she saw Robert standing on the deck, her expression went through a series of rapid changes. First surprise, then confusion, then something that looked almost like fear. She stopped swinging and stood up slowly, studying him with eyes that were eerily reminiscent of David's. Grandpa Robert, she said uncertainly. Hi, sweetheart, Robert said, his voice catching. I've missed you so much. Emma didn't run to him the way she might have 3 years ago. Instead, she walked slowly across the yard, stopping a few feet away from the deck. She looked up at him with a mixture of hope and wariness that broke Robert's heart. Are you still mad? She asked in a small voice. The question hit Robert like a physical blow. This innocent child had been carrying the burden of believing that her grandfather was angry with her, and that burden had shaped 3 years of her young life. Oh honey, Robert said, setting down the shopping bags and kneeling so he was at her eye level. I was never mad at you, not ever. I was sad about Daddy dying, and I made some very bad choices about how to handle that sadness, but I was never ever mad at you. Emma studied his face carefully, as if trying to determine whether she could trust his words. Mommy said you needed time to feel better, she said. But it's been a really long time. It has been a long time, Robert agreed. Too long, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for missing so much of your life. I'm sorry for not being here when you needed me. Emma took a tentative step closer. Are you better now? Robert thought about Jesus's visit the night before, about the conversation with Sarah, about the transformation he had experienced in his heart. I'm much better, he said honestly, and I'm here now, if you want me to be. Emma looked at the shopping bags behind him. What's in the bags? Princess things, Robert said with a smile. I heard you're going to be in a play. For the first time, Emma's face lit up with genuine excitement. I'm Princess Aurora. I get to wear a pink dress and a crown and everything. Do you want to hear my lines? I would love to hear your lines, Robert said. Emma launched into her performance right there in the backyard, transforming from a cautious 8-year-old into a confident actress. She recited her lines with dramatic flair, spinning and curtsying and gesturing expressively. Robert watched in amazement, seeing so much of David in her mannerisms and expressions. When she finished, Robert applauded enthusiastically. That was incredible. You're going to be the best Princess Aurora ever. Emma beamed with pride, and some of the wariness left her eyes. Do you really think so? I know so, and I brought you some things to help you feel even more like a real princess. Robert began pulling items out of the shopping bags. A beautiful pink princess dress, with layers of tulle, a sparkling tiara, a magic wand, with ribbons and stars, princess slippers and a jewelry box that played music when you opened it. Emma's eyes grew wide with wonder. Are these all for me? Every single thing, Robert said. Because you're my princess, and I love you very much. Emma looked at the gifts, then at Robert, then at her mother, who was watching from the deck with tears in her eyes. Can I try them on? Emma asked. Of course you can. Emma spent the next hour trying on different combinations of the princess accessories, modeling them for Robert and Sarah. With each outfit change, she became more animated, more trusting, more like the little girl Robert remembered. Finally, she settled on wearing the tiara and carrying the magic wand, and she came to sit beside Robert on the deck steps. "Grandpa Robert," she said seriously, "I missed you a lot. I missed you too, sweetheart. More than you can possibly know. When Daddy died, I thought maybe you didn't want to be my grandpa anymore." Robert felt tears sting his eyes. "Oh Emma, I will always want to be your grandpa. Death can't change that. Sadness can't change that. Nothing in the whole world can change how much I love you." Emma leaned against him, and Robert wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side. "Are you going to come to my play?" she asked. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Robert promised. "I'll be in the front row, cheering for you." "Will you take me school shopping?" Emma asked, hopefully. "Like we used to do." "Absolutely. We'll get you the best backpack in the whole store." Emma was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him with David's eyes. "Grandpa Robert, do you think Daddy can see me in the play?" The question caught Robert off guard. He thought about Jesus' words the night before, about love that doesn't die when people die, about David's continued presence in their lives. "I think Daddy can see everything you do," Robert said carefully, "and I think he's very proud of the smart, talented, beautiful girl you've become." "I talk to him sometimes," Emma confided. "At night before I go to sleep, I tell him about school and my friends and stuff. Do you think he can hear me?" Robert looked at Sarah, who was wiping tears from her eyes. Then he looked back at Emma, this wise little girl who had been navigating grief and loss with the resilience that only children possess.
"I think Daddy hears every word," Robert said, "and I think he talks to people who love you, to make sure you're taken care of." "Like who?" Robert thought about the mysterious visitor who had appeared at his door, who had known things no stranger could know, who had guided him back to his family with words of love and forgiveness. "Like people who care about families staying together," Robert said. "Like people who believe in second chances and forgiveness and love." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She snuggled closer to Robert and began telling him about everything he had missed. Her first day of second grade, the Tooth Fairy's visits, her best friend Madison, her soccer team, her favorite books. As Emma chattered away, Robert marveled at the resilience of children, at their capacity to love and trust even after being hurt. This little girl had every reason to be angry with him, to reject his attempts at reconciliation, to punish him the way he had punished Sarah. Instead, she was opening her heart to him with the same generosity that David had always shown. Sarah eventually went inside to make lunch, and Robert found himself alone with Emma for the first time in 3 years. They sat on the swing set together, Emma in her tiara, and Robert pushing her gently back and forth. "Grandpa Robert," Emma said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Sometimes I get really sad about Daddy, like really sad. And I don't want Mommy to know, because she gets sad too, and then we're both crying." Robert felt his heart break for this little girl who was trying to protect her mother from her own grief. "It's okay to be sad about Daddy," Robert said gently. "It's okay to cry when you miss him. That doesn't mean you're making Mommy sadder. It means you love Daddy very much. Do you get sad about him too?" "Every day," Robert admitted. "But I've learned that being sad about someone you love isn't a bad thing. It means they were important to you. It means they made your life better when they were here." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I wish he could see me in the play." "I think he will see you," Robert said. "Maybe not the way we see each other, but I think love finds a way to connect us even when someone isn't here anymore." As if summoned by their conversation about David, Robert suddenly felt a presence nearby. He looked around the backyard and saw a figure standing by the garden gate, the same man who had visited him the night before. Jesus was wearing the same simple clothes, and he was watching Emma with an expression of infinite tenderness. He caught Robert's eye and smiled, then gestured toward Emma with a look that seemed to say, "This is what it's all about. This is why forgiveness matters. This is love." Emma didn't seem to notice the visitor. She was focused on her swinging, humming a song from her play. But as Jesus watched her, Robert saw something extraordinary happen. Emma's expression grew peaceful and happy in a way that seemed to glow from within. Her humming became more melodic, more joyful. Jesus looked at Robert one more time, nodded approvingly, and then simply faded away, leaving behind only the faint scent of roses and the feeling of profound blessing. "Grandpa Robert," Emma said suddenly, "I just had the weirdest feeling, like Daddy was right here with us." Robert's breath caught. "Really?" "Yeah, like he was smiling at us, like he was happy that you came back." Robert looked at the spot where Jesus had been standing, then at his granddaughter who was still glowing with that inexplicable peace. "I think you're right, sweetheart. I think Daddy is very happy that we're together again." Sarah called them in for lunch, and they spent the afternoon like a real family. They looked through photo albums, with Emma showing Robert all the pictures from the past 3 years. They played board games and watched one of Emma's favorite movies. Robert helped Emma practice her lines for the play, reading the other parts and cheering for her dramatic delivery. As the day wore on, Robert noticed that Sarah was relaxing too. The tension that had been etched in her face for 3 years was beginning to ease. She laughed at Emma's jokes, contributed to their games, and gradually began to seem like the woman Robert from before the tragedy. Late in the afternoon, while Emma was in her room organizing her new princess accessories, Sarah and Robert sat on the front porch and had the conversation they should have had 3 years ago. "I'm sorry," Robert said, "for what felt like the 100th time. I'm sorry for abandoning you when you needed me most. I'm sorry for blaming you for something that wasn't your fault. I'm sorry for making your grief harder by adding my anger to it." "I'm sorry too," Sarah said. "I'm sorry for not trying harder to reach you. I'm sorry for giving up on our relationship when I should have kept fighting for Emma's sake." "We both made mistakes," Robert said, "but we can't change the past. We can only decide what to do now." Sarah nodded. "What do you want to do now?" "I want to be part of your lives again," Robert said, without hesitation. "I want to be Emma's grandfather. I want to help you with whatever you need. I want us to be a family again." "What about the house?" Sarah asked. "This place is too big for just Emma and me, and the mortgage payments are getting harder to manage on my salary alone." Robert looked at the house that needed so much work, then at Sarah who had been struggling alone for so long. "What if you and Emma moved in with me?" he suggested. "My house is paid off, and it's big enough for all of us. Emma could have David's old room, and you could have the guest room. We could split the household expenses, and I could help with Emma while you're at work." Sarah stared at him in surprise. "You would want that?" "I would love that," Robert said honestly. "I've been rattling around in that house by myself for 3 years, and it's felt like a tomb. Having you and Emma there would bring it back to life. But what if it doesn't work out? What if we get on each other's nerves? What if the grief is too much for all of us living together?" "Then we'll figure it out as we go," Robert said. "But I think David would want us to try. I think he'd want his family to take care of each other." They talked through the practical details, how to handle childcare, household responsibilities, finances. They agreed to take it slowly, maybe starting with weekends, and gradually building up to a permanent arrangement. As the sun began to set, Robert knew it was time to leave. Emma hugged him goodbye with the enthusiasm of a child who was no longer afraid of being abandoned. "Will you come to my play?" she asked again. "I'll be there," Robert promised. "And afterward we'll go out for ice cream to celebrate." "Can we get ice cream with sprinkles?" "We can get ice cream with anything you want," Robert said, kissing the top of her head. As Robert drove home, he reflected on the miraculous transformation that had taken place in just 24 hours. Yesterday he had been a bitter, isolated old man, consumed by anger and regret. Today he was part of a family again, looking forward to the future, instead of being trapped in the past. He thought about Jesus' visit, about the words of wisdom and love that had cracked open his hardened heart. Whether the man had been divine or simply divinely inspired, the result was the same: redemption, healing, hope. When he got home, Robert walked through his house with new eyes, imagining Emma's laughter echoing through the rooms, picturing Sarah's smile at the breakfast table, envisioning birthday parties and Christmas mornings, and ordinary Tuesday evenings filled with family warmth. He went to David's old bedroom, which he had kept exactly as it was when David moved out after college. The room would need to be redecorated for Emma, transformed from a teenage boy's space into a little girl's princess palace. Robert smiled, thinking about how much fun it would be to shop for pink furniture and unicorn decorations. That evening Robert called his sister Margaret in Phoenix, whom he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. "Robert?" Margaret said, clearly shocked to hear from him. Is everything okay? Everything's wonderful, Robert said. I wanted to tell you that I'm going to be a grandfather again. What do you mean? Emma's been your granddaughter all along. I know, Robert said, but I haven't been acting like her grandfather. That's about to change. He told Margaret about his reconciliation with Sarah and Emma, about their plans to live together as a family. Margaret cried with joy and relief, admitting that she had been praying for this day for 3 years. What changed? Margaret asked. What made you finally reach out to them? Robert thought about how to answer that question. How do you explain a divine encounter to someone who wasn't there? How do you describe a transformation that defies rational explanation? I had a visitor, Robert said finally. Someone who helped me see that holding on to anger was destroying more than just my own life. Someone who reminded me that love is stronger than grief. A counselor, something like that, Robert said with a smile. The night of Emma's play arrived, and Robert sat in the front row as promised, wearing his best suit and holding a bouquet of pink roses. When Emma appeared on stage in her princess costume, radiant with confidence and joy, Robert felt his heart swell with pride and love. She performed beautifully, delivering her lines with perfect clarity and grace. But the moment that nearly brought Robert to his knees was when Emma finished her final monologue, and instead of looking at the audience in general, looked directly at him and smiled. It was David's smile, bright and full of love and mischief, and in that moment Robert knew with absolute certainty that his son was there, watching his daughter shine, proud of the family that had found its way back to each other. After the play, as they celebrated with ice cream and sprinkles, Emma asked Robert a question that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Grandpa Robert, do you think people can come back from heaven to help their families? Robert looked at his granddaughter, this wise little girl who seemed to understand mysteries that adults struggle to comprehend. I think love never really dies, he said. And I think when we love someone very much they find ways to help us even when we can't see them. Emma nodded seriously. I think Daddy sent someone to help you remember how to love us again. Robert felt tears sting his eyes as he realized that his 8-year-old granddaughter had understood something profound about grace, about divine intervention, about the power of love to transcend even death. I think you're right, sweetheart, he said. I think Daddy sent exactly the right person at exactly the right time. 6 months later, Robert stood in his backyard, watching Emma and Sarah plant flowers in the garden they were creating together. The house was alive again, filled with laughter and music, and the chaotic joy of family life. Emma had adjusted beautifully to living with her grandfather. She loved having someone to help with homework, someone to read bedtime stories, someone to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. Sarah had been able to reduce her work hours and spend more time with her daughter, knowing that Robert was there to provide stability and support. They had their challenges, of course. Living together required patience and compromise, and daily choices to prioritize love over convenience. But every difficulty was worth it for the blessing of being together, of honoring David's memory by taking care of each other. On quiet evenings, when Emma was asleep and Sarah was reading in her room, Robert would sit in his chair and look at the photograph of David, Sarah, and Emma from Emma's 5th birthday. But now instead of seeing loss, he saw love. Instead of seeing what was taken away, he saw what remained. And sometimes on the edge of perception, he would catch a glimpse of a figure in the garden, or hear a whisper in the wind, that reminded him that love never dies. Grace is always available, and it's never too late for redemption. Robert Mitchell had learned that forgiveness isn't just something you give to other people, it's something you give. He had learned that grief shared is grief diminished, and love shared is love multiplied. Most importantly, he had learned that sometimes, when we're lost in our own darkness, divine love finds a way to reach us through the most unexpected messengers. The bitter grandfather, who had refused to forgive, had become a man who understood that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength, not surrender but victory, not an ending but a beginning. And in the eyes of his granddaughter, in the laughter that once again filled his home, in the family that had been broken and made whole, Robert saw the face of grace itself, patient, persistent, and powerful enough to transform even the most hardened heart. The end finale Yorumu va Colingem Charis. This story reminds us of one of life's most profound truths. Forgiveness isn't just a gift we give to others, it's the key that unlocks our own prison of bitterness and pain. Robert Mitchell's journey, from a bitter, isolated grandfather to a loving family man, didn't happen because he was perfect, or because he deserved a second chance. It happened because divine love met him exactly where he was, broken, angry, and lost, and showed him a different path forward. Think about the people in your own life. Is there someone you've been holding a grudge against? A family member you've cut off because of past hurts? A relationship that ended in pain and anger? Robert's story shows us that it's never too late to choose love over resentment, healing over hatred. Emma's innocent question, "Are you still mad?" cuts straight to the heart of how our unresolved anger affects the people we love most. Children don't understand adult grudges, they only know when love is present or absent. How many Emmas in our lives are wondering why grandpa or mom or dad stopped loving them? The most beautiful part of this story isn't that Robert finally forgave Sarah, it's that he learned to forgive himself. Sometimes we hold on to anger because it feels easier than facing our own guilt, our own mistakes, our own humanity. But true healing begins when we extend the same grace to ourselves that we hope to receive from others. Sarah's hidden guilt, about the night David died, reveals another powerful truth. We often blame ourselves for tragedies that were completely beyond our control. How many of us carry unnecessary guilt for accidents, losses, or failures that weren't really our fault? Sometimes the person we need to forgive most is ourselves. Have you ever experienced an unexpected visitor, perhaps not as dramatic as Robert's, but someone who appeared at just the right moment with exactly the words you needed to hear? Sometimes divine intervention comes through a friend's phone call, a stranger's kindness, or even a child's innocent question that breaks open our hardened hearts. The miracle isn't just that Robert's family was restored, it's that Emma never stopped believing her grandfather would come back to her. Children have an incredible capacity for hope and forgiveness that we adults often lose. Maybe we can learn something from their resilient hearts. Share your story. Have you ever witnessed or experienced the power of forgiveness to restore a broken family? Have you been the bitter grandfather, the grieving daughter-in-law, or the confused child, wondering why love disappeared? Tell us in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, like if you believe in second chances, subscribe for more life-changing stories. Share with someone who needs hope today. Remember, it's never too late to choose love.